Welcome, 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 folks. Thanks for joining us today. We're just gonna get people in, let people in. I know some few folks reached out about links, so we're getting those folks squared away. And I'm gonna kick it off to the brains behind the operation today, Dr. Shannon Taylor, who is spearheading this strategic initiative on behalf of the OB division to strengthen the most important part of our scientific process, the review process.
Thanks, Beth. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shannon Taylor. I am at the University of Central Florida, and I'd like to first recognize Beth Campbell, who you just heard and saw from the University of Minnesota, and Michael Park from the University of Pennsylvania. Together, the three of us are spearheading a strategic initiative for the OB division, what we're calling the Reviewing Well series. This is part one of three. Thank you all so much for joining us. Today, we're going to cover the foundations of reviewing well. I also want to give a special thanks and shout out to Alex Rubenstein, Anish Rai, and John Bush. These three were instrumental in putting this piece together. Just thank you to the three of you for your efforts here. Um, I want to note that the goal here of this broader initiative is ultimately to improve the rigor, the transparency, the efficiency of the review process, and the experience that we have in the review process, and that's across all the stakeholders. I want to improve the experiences for authors, for reviewers, for editors, right? So we play multiple roles, we wear multiple hats in this thing. So it's my hope that all of these stakeholders come out better as a result of it. I just also want to mention briefly that this is a series and it's one sort of arm of the broader initiative. We also have part two will be at Academy and part three will be post Academy. We have another series as well, specifically for editors and associate editors at some of our field's top journals. Um, it's been really fun and meaningful to work on this, and I hope you all enjoy yourself today and get something out of it. So again, this is the Reviewing Well series. This is part one. We're going to have some presentations, some brief presentations to start, and then some breakout sessions where we will have Q&A with associate editors and editors. And again, the hope is that we'll improve the review process across the board. Better reviewers, better skills, more confidence, and hopefully some efficiencies in the process as well. So just really briefly, today's agenda is going to look like this. Shannon and so myself and Beth and I, we're going to sort of lay the foundation and sort of set the norms for what we hope the session will be like today. And then we'll start with some presentations. We've got a great lineup here. And then we'll get to the sort of the main event, which is the breakout discussions with the associate editors and some editors as well. So here's where you get a chance to chat with these folks in a small group setting, ask any burning questions you have, and hopefully take away a few nuggets with you. From then, we'll bring it back to the main room and debrief as a group and share some themes and insights from those breakout rooms, facilitated by Beth. And each associate editor leading the breakout room can sort of share one or two key insights in the discussions, and then we'll wrap up and talk about next steps, and we'll leave you with something. We'll give you something to take home, and sort of let you know what's coming up in the future. So with all that, I want to turn over to Beth.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, so we just have some quick goals and assumptions. We like clear processes here in the OB division. But the whole point of this session, the whole series, is to really level set on how the review process actually works. Some of us get formal training of this. There's variability in that. And so we've created this series to build on itself and making sure, and it's going to be recorded, making sure that anybody who wants to be engaged in the review process, which I hope everybody wants to be, you can understand from very basic to more advanced things as the series goes on. And so we have wonderful folks joining us today, like more than 25 associate editors and editors in chief, as Shannon mentioned, to share their guidance. It's all about helping build scientific discernment, confidence that you know how these review processes work, what's going on behind the scenes, and appreciating the things that that editorial teams are doing and understanding your role and how you fit within that to fortify this process that's so critical to effective science, right? And so, we're going to tell you what our bias is from the jump, and we're going to try to sell it to you, which is that reviewing is one of the most important things you can do in terms of service in the field. It's one of the, I would argue, is one of the most important things you can do as a scientist in the field, as we can be contributing to one another's work and developing one another's work. And with a couple of things. So one of our other assumptions though is that you're gonna get advice from a bunch of different folks. And yes, these are folks who have been associate editors or editors in chief at journals. They're speaking as themselves. They're not representing any specific journal, just giving you broad information and knowledge about their experience and their insights accrued over time. And at the end of the day, we make suggestions, you make decisions about how you participate in the review process. And then our final assumption is that, whatever you learn today, it's relevant across all journals, right? We're keeping it pretty foundational and basic. And that if really good reviewing skills and habits and hygienes and routines and processes transfer to other areas of our science. A few norms then, if Shannon, you'll click for me. We do have really like 240 people registered. We'll see what our yield is today, but we should have a bunch of folks and we're going to, be moving folks around, making sure we can enable really good conversation. So we ask that you stay on mute when you're in the main room. Fill the chat if you have questions. If you have questions or if you have, you can, I think the QA is going to be enabled. Our chat is going to, you can, feel free to use that, throughout. And then AEs, feel free to jump in and answer those questions as they come through. When you're in the breakout rooms, please join them promptly and please make sure that you're asking questions of really broad relevance. You're not idiosyncratic things about maybe something that you experienced. Or like, how to get your paper published, right? Really broad relevance of how to develop acumen and confidence and discernment as a reviewer. And we ask that you do engage and, let's put the work in workshop and have really good dialogue in those groups. And so with that, if you could put your video on if it's appropriate for your context. We've got great folks joining. And we'll just push past this and introduce those folks. But you can see we've got folks from all of our major top journals. Massive thanks and shout out and gratitude to those folks to make sure that you can have really good conversations and in those breakout rooms that are small enough. And if you could click for me, Shannon, we'll just introduce them and then we'll have some warm-up presentations for you. Cool. So thank you to Katie Badura who's joining us, Mike Baer, Talia Bauer. I'm going to hang out for a little bit, hopefully. Emily Campion, Jenny Carson-Mar, Gilad Hen. Rosalind Chow, unfortunately, isn't with us. She's only with us in spirit today, but we appreciate her. Trevor Folk, Allie Gabriel, Lindy Greer, Tiffany Johnson-James, John K. Mueller, Jackie Koopman, Laura Little. Yi Hao Liu also is a little bit under the weather, so I said, thank you for joining us in spirit. Fadel Mata, Jess Methat, Marie Mitchell, Sam Paustian Underdahl, Chris Rosen, who tomorrow takes the helm as editor-in-chief of JOM. Thank you, Chris. Alad Sheriff, Mindy Shas, JP Stevens. Shannon will also join us in a breakout room. Chris Troyster, my favorite person, Betty Lee, Joe, and last but not least, Luke Zhu. All right, over to Shannon and Alex.
Alex and Beth and I just have a few words to say. The first part here is just answering the question, why become a reviewer and why become a very good reviewer? So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Alex Rubenstein.
Thanks. Well, everyone's here, so that's sort of a first step to, improving your desire to want to be a better reviewer. But I just wanted to go over some of the perhaps motivations to want to not only be a reviewer, but improve your reviewing skills. Certainly on the professional side, if you have done some reviewing for the Academy of Management Conference, or even done some ad hoc reviewing for some journals, to the extent that you are writing good reviews, are doing timely reviews, this is going to increase your likelihood of getting an editorial review board invitation. And I mean, that on its own is a very recognized, professional accomplishment, which over the course of your career can lead to future roles as associate editors or even editors-in-chief. You can learn journal standards by doing good reviewing. You can understand better what a contribution means at different journals, or what issues are frequently highlighted at one journal versus another, and those idiosyncrasies. You can build your visibility with your editors. They'll come to see you as a subject matter expert in your given area. And certainly, there is always the extrinsic good feeling of getting the reinforcement of your work with a best reviewer award. Beyond the professional, there's a skill development factor as well, that in be being a good reviewer and improving your reviewing skills can translate and carry over to your own writing skills. You recognize the key issues that were brought up in the review process, for instance. Maybe you can learn to avoid those issues. You learn how to better convey a contribution in your own paper, or improve the logical flow of your hypotheses. You may be well versed in a given set of theories, but in getting greater exposure to others' work, you find new ideas or more appropriate theories, perhaps, that you can test your research questions. You can strengthen your methodological rigor. I tend to think that studies can often be rejected before they're even submitted just because of research design issues. So in seeing the issues that come up in the review process, you can probably avoid these pitfalls. And then lastly, within this point, I think you can become a better mentor, sort of understanding the ins and outs and details of a paper. You develop a keener eye for uh, the way things should be. So not only identifying the things that are incorrect and how to fix it, sort of a type 1 error, maybe understanding the issues that aren't there in a paper, but that should be there. So that kind of maybe type 2 error recognition, you might say. Shannon? And then just more broad impact. We have this quality control system. Good science is consensual in the sense that many parties from different perspectives come to agree with one another. And so being that role as a reviewer is hugely important to maintaining good science and good quality of our journals. You want good feedback as well in your own papers. So uh, to be able to give that good feedback to others is a great way to pay it forward. You can shape the direction of our field and the knowledge that we share, that is public in our publications, of course, and certainly the shared obligation that we have in all aspects of scholarship. Thank you. So rather than being considered an obligation or a rote part of service that you have to do, I hope we can shift the lens of the review process to thinking of it as an opportunity to improve our science, to improve the quality of journal output that we create. So naturally, the peer review process isn't perfect, but it is the best system we have. Um, it is that quality filter, and it ensures that the theories that are being tested, the theories that are perhaps being refuted, the theories that are being advanced and extended and built upon, that these extensions are justified, whether it be in leadership or teamwork, whatever your research area may be. Um, it's really the only service that we do that overlaps with the research that we also conduct. So the research that you conduct, or sorry, the service that you perform within your institution, within your department. This is really a great service to our field and the science that we do. So we don't want to think of it as an obligation, not as this optional favor, but really as an essential part of what it means to be a scientist, what it means to be a part of the research process. And I hope that you can think of reviewing in that spirit and come with that takeaway from today's session. Thank you.
And I just want to double click on that. As you think about engaging in the field in reviewing, I know a lot of you are already doing that. a lot of us know what it's like when you get that review request or it's due and you have one more thing on your plate and you might not have all the time in the day to work on it. It might sometimes feel hard because you're doing essentially other people working on other people's projects. Um, but I do hope that we can collectively shift our mindset a little um, in thinking about reviewing as service. And this really landed for me a few years ago after Cindy Devers generously invited me to be a JOM AE, and I was really started to think more about my role in editorial service. I've been reviewing a lot. I liked reviewing, but it felt like I was doing it all the time. And it felt a little early for me at the time. So I went to a session at Academy. It was a bunch of editors in the room. It was a session about like why be an AE, why be a great reviewer, why be on editorial boards. It was a Tuesday afternoon at Academy, so there was basically just the editors in the room and like three attendees, given it got such a coveted shutting down of Academy time slot. And I asked a bunch of the AEs in the room, like, why did you take this on? This is a huge service load. It's wildly underpaid or free. It's hundreds of hours of expert time, thousands of hours of expert time, dependent on the length of your term or whether you're not an editor in chief. A lot of people had great answers for me. And then, of course, the king of the hot take, Matt Cronin, rolled up to me and because he like had heard me, I was asking this question to other people, and he goes, "It is a disservice to yourself and to science to think of reviewing as service." It is arguably the one thing, maybe PhD advising also fits into this, but it is arguably the one thing we do that sharpens our scientific discernment. It keeps you relevant in the game. It keeps you well acquainted with the latest literatures and techniques. It is where you sharpen your capacity as a scholar, and it directly impacts positively your own scholarship and your ability to collaborate with other people, teach strong scholarship, mentor strong norms. It is the pillar that our whole science stands on. So let's stop thinking about reviewing as service and think about it as continuous development of ourselves, ownership of our craft, and the thing that really differentiates us as strong scientists. Researchers don't review. Scientists review, according to Matt Cronin. So I hope that we'll kind of carry that mindset with us when we're tired and when we still have to review a paper that's due in a few days, and recognize that we're investing in ourselves and investing in our science when we are great reviewers.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Beth. So, moving on, Gilad and I are here representing the University of Maryland College Park, and we just want to take a few minutes to talk about the foundational elements of the review process, just to make sure that after this, when we hear from Michael and Mike about crafting a good review, and then we segue into the breakout sessions, just ensuring that we all have the same mental model of what the review process actually looks like so that we can then develop a deeper understanding of how to make it more effective and efficient. If we could go to the next slide. So this is roughly what the trajectory of a paper looks like from the time you submit it, all of the steps in between, until finally a decision is issued. And I'm going to assume that most of us are already familiar with the submission stage, and it's only after that that we get other people involved and it truly becomes the peer review process. So we're going to start by talking about stage two. So if we could go to the next slide. We talk about desk review as well as reviewer solicitation. So it is just a brief aside worth noting that journals are increasingly inserting an additional quick layer of review before a paper hits an editor's desk. So this quick layer of review is for things like formatting. Have you got your IRB information? Open science information, things like that. And then it reaches the editor's desk, who then has to decide whether to desk reject it or whether it gets sent out for full review. And when Gilad and I were talking about this recently, and he was sharing some of his experiences as former editor of JAP, we came to realize that there's a few common categories that lead to papers often getting frequently desk rejected. These could be large issues associated with fit. For example, submitting something that might be great, it's just very obviously outside the scope of the journal. It could be issues pertaining to quality. For example, it's a one study package, and that one study is a survey of 10 friends at your last dinner party. Or it could be issues of overlap, which might evoke concerns about plagiarism or other ethical concerns. These tend to be some of the most common reasons why papers get desk rejected. Now, assuming a paper doesn't fail at any of these stages, it then enters the reviewer solicitation stage. And now for this, as well as the other stages, there's going to be a little bit of variation by outlet. And so to an earlier point, we want to make sure that some of the insights are going to be generalizable across journals. Sometimes the editor is going to select the AE as well as the reviewers. More often, the editor selects the AE, who then selects the reviewers. How many reviewers? This can also vary. Some journals do two, many tend to do three. You might rarely get a fourth reviewer added as well. And just to kind of echo Alex's earlier point about really viewing this as something more than an obligation, it's just worth remembering that when you're asked to review, it's because someone values your perspective, whether it's the editor, whether it's the AE, whether it's the authors who may have requested you in their cover letter because they see you as a subject matter expert. And so this is when the peer review process officially begins. And if we could go to the next slide. The review process itself typically takes about 30 days. Again, there's going to be some variation by journal, but I will say a frequent piece of advice that I've received over the last few years and that Gilad echoed when we were speaking about this, the importance of being timely. Just as reviewers are scoring papers, which affects their likelihood of getting published, AEs are scoring reviewers based on the quality of their reviews and based on the timeliness of their reviews. And this is going to affect your likelihood of getting asked to review again in the future. It's likely going to play a role in whether you get asked to serve on an editorial board. And so submitting reviews on time is an easy way to start checking one of those boxes. The reviews include public comments that are seen by both authors and editors, as well as private comments that are not typically shown to the authors. And I will say something that I personally experienced as I started reviewing was thinking that the private comments were not really to be used except in exceptional circumstances. And that was something that I learned from AEs. And again, Gilad reiterated, newer reviewers tend to underutilize the private comments. And so don't be afraid to use those as you're reviewing a paper. In terms of thinking about the job of the reviewer as opposed to the job of an AE, reviewers are there to recommend while AEs are there to decide. Your job as a reviewer is to provide a very valuable perspective that's taken into account, but it's not to issue an absolute recommendation. That being said, there are things that you could do to make an editor's life easier or harder. And if you want to be a good reviewer, you're probably going to try to make editors' lives easier. And a common way in which you can achieve this is to ensure that there's a level of congruence between the public comments that are going out to everyone, the private comments to the editor, as well as the numeric scores that many journals have you assign to papers. For example, if your comments are extremely negative, but you give the paper very high numeric scores, people are reasonably going to get confused about this, and that is one way in which editors' lives would be made harder rather than easier. So ensure congruence between all of the different pieces of your peer review. And I'm going to call on Gilad here. Gilad, I'm wondering if there are any thoughts that you have on reviewer timeliness or the degree to which reviewers should or should not be prescriptive in their comments that you want to share with the audience.
Yeah, sure. So real quick, so in terms of timeliness, I think you don't get there's really no benefit or any any positive impression management for doing reviews within a day or two. But you do get remembered if you're constantly late. And so my recommendation in terms of timeliness is to be somewhere between 1 and 4 weeks, depending on what's going on in your life and so forth. That's one. In terms of the congruence aspect, I think you need to remember that there's multiple roles as part of the review. You're a gatekeeper, you're also part of developing scholarship in our field and so forth. And it's also important that everyone who's in the review process shape the reputation of journals and how we view them and how we, because we as authors can go and choose to submit else, in different places. And so one simple thing is in terms of balancing between the raising issues and providing some actionable feedback is important, but also make sure that if you put yourself in the author's perspective, you want to give some leeway for the AE to make the decision. And so you don't want to use words like this paper should be rejected or fatal flaw, things like that. But you also don't want to be overly positive saying, this is very publishable idea and so forth. So in other words, you want to balance the substantive and methods kind of feedback with ways that give the AE some leeway in their decision in that sense.
And I actually think that's a perfect segue to the next slide. Thank you, Gilad. So that segues perfectly into now the reviews have been submitted and now it's back to the AE to make a decision. And I think Gilad's comments really nicely underscore that there is a critical difference between the job of an individual reviewer versus the job of the editor. The reviewer is there to provide their perspective. The AE's role is not just to passively count the votes, but instead to synthesize, to make judgments. And it's also worth noting that AEs have different strategies and different preferences to achieve this objective. Some tend to be a little bit more lenient in the first round, but might be rejecting more first round R&Rs. Some have very high rejection rates, but if they give an R&R, that's a pretty strong signal that the paper might have a good shot of getting published. Some tend to be more directive, some provide less specific guidance, as well as different preferences on how long the review process should go on. So as an individual reviewer, it's worth remembering the difference in your role versus the editor's role, and also remembering that editors are going to vary in their preference with going along versus against reviewer recommendations. That doesn't mean that your feedback isn't important. In fact, your feedback is critically important as it informs their decisions. And again, I want to throw to Gilad. Gilad, I'm wondering if there's anything else about the AE decision stage that you wish more new reviewers knew about.
Yeah, the AE role is really, really critical. For us as authors and reviewers, the AE is the face of the journal. So our experiences with the journals are experiences with AEs. And, there's another session we'll do later on, I know, the OB division that deals more with AEs and editors. But for your role as an author and reviewer, keep in mind that, you're there to you're part of the system, but the AE has a major role. And I think it's also important for us to remember as people on the other side in terms of AE and editors that, we need to be very careful in how we address the letters and so forth. And there's a responsibility of per paper, but there's also responsibility to the field in terms of balancing between gatekeeping and developing papers. And, you probably all heard about a lot of reputations of journals that end up being with AEs, late decisions, that's AE, or more so than reviewers. And that's a misconception, by the way. Reviewers are late oftentimes, but it's the AE's job to run after them, so that's sort of another important job. If the reviews are really positive and the AE decision is negative, then AE should explain why and so forth. So there's all those kind of issues, and it's important to remember that it's a scientific marketplace of idea, and we all play a role in it. And in that sense, we need to really take that job seriously. But as was said, and as many comments in the chat already kind of allude to, there's also great opportunity for professional development, personal development, for being part of that process as an author, as a reviewer, and then if you get a chance as an AE and so forth.
Amazing. Thank you, Gilad. And if we could just go to the next slide. And then the final stage, the author response, of course, a spectrum of more positive to more negative decisions. If there's an acceptance, then more reviewers are not going to be needed as the paper will be moving forward with publication. With minor revision, there tends to be a little bit of variation. In some cases, it may not be sent back to the reviewers. The AE might handle it themselves. In some cases, they might only go back to one or two of the reviewers, depending on specific comments that still need to be addressed. Major revision, in these cases, going to get sent back to the reviewers. In some occasions, a new reviewer might be added if it's seen as necessary. Reject and resubmit is an interesting edge case that we're seeing at several journals, where it typically involves an overhaul surpassing the scope of a typical revision. And if the authors choose to resubmit, it is treated often as a new submission, meaning that it will probably go to a new set of reviewers. So again, as an individual reviewer who weighed in on the original submission, your comments are going to have an impact on the paper, even if your role in its trajectory comes to an end, because a reject and resubmit typically means it's going to go to a new set of reviewers. Or statistically, the most common outcome that I'm sure all of us are intimately familiar with, a reject, where there's no viable path to publication identified, which also means that your role as a reviewer for the process of that paper comes to an end. Except, I will say, and the last point will kind of leave you with something that I definitely undersold the value of until AEs, including people like Beth, taught me how important this is. Read the decision letters. That is when your process comes to an end. Reading the decision letters is going to teach you how the other reviewers are thinking. It's going to teach you how the editors are thinking. Of course, that's going to help you understand how to be a better reviewer. But again, treating this as an opportunity, it's going to give you an inside view into how these folks are evaluating research, and they might be evaluating your research in the future. And so it's probably going to teach you how to get better at publishing your own work as well. So that's just our brief kind of overview of the mechanics of reviewing. And I'm just going to call on Gilad one last time in case you have any closing thoughts or advice or anecdotes you want to share before we move on.
Sure. Yeah. I think of this process as it's a little bit like separation of power kind of thing from government, in a sense of you got the authors who wants to publish and want to promote ideas. Reviewers are sort of gatekeeper that sort of are expected to sort of find what might be wrong or might need more development. And then you get the editor's role / AE that, my biggest nightmare when I was an editor was I literally had a recurring nightmare that I have an empty issue, that basically there's not enough paper to publish, right? So you need to balance that. And for you, if you're just starting the review, being as a reviewer, or you want to sort of do that transition from reviewer to AE, to editorial board member, think of the perspective taken of those different constituents, if you will, right? So think of what is your role as an author? What is your role as a reviewer? What is the role of the editor? And that would make you a better author, because when you write papers with that perspective in mind, it gives you a little better balance and self-check, if you will, in terms of doing your work better as well. And then I'm sure we'll get more specific advice in the breakout sessions. But thanks, Anish, for putting this together. Thanks for the organizers. This is great. Thanks.
Thanks, Gilad. I think we're ready to pass it to Michael and Mike.
All right, thanks for having us out. So our approach as we went through this is I'm going to give you the editor's perspective, and then Michael's going to give you the perspective of a reviewer. Just as a heads up, I'm going to pump him up a little bit here. He is a fantastic reviewer. He's winning reviewer awards. He gets it. So listen closely to what he has to say, because those are the type of reviews that we want and that we appreciate as AEs. Next slide. Can I click forward? No, okay. So I will first want to talk about your attitude when you think about reviewing. And there are some reviewers that clearly think that they are the bouncers at this bar, making sure that nobody ever gets in. And I will look at their review history, and I'll see some reviewers who have gotten 30 papers, 25 papers, and have never recommended a revision. And I want to suggest that you think about it differently. Can you click the next slide? is just like bars, they need patrons. We need people inside. Well, journals, as going off what Gilad said, we need papers. We want to publish papers. I also have this recurring nightmare that I'm going to have an empty issue. And so your goal is not to say we're going to make sure that nothing ever gets in. It's to try to make sure that the right type of stuff gets in. You don't let everything through the door. You don't want somebody who's already intoxicated coming into the bar. And to be fair, there are many authors that probably seem like they were intoxicated when they wrote their theory section or ran their methods. And so like that's the type of thing that we don't necessarily need coming at the door, but we do need people coming into the door. Next slide. So this is a quote from Hollenbeck's chapter. He wrote this speaking to AEs or editors about the process of the review process, but I think it's very helpful for authors and reviewers to understand this as well. So the editors want to accept papers. They need to accept papers. Hollenbeck said the editor's role is to make sure that each published article contributes to either increasing consensus about the validity and utility of some idea or changing the consensus away from one idea towards some other idea that everyone agrees is better. Editors should ask themselves, how am I going to create or shift consensus with this manuscript so that I can contribute to the discipline? So your goal as a reviewer is to help editors achieve this goal. How can you identify those nuggets or those potential bits that might help shift consensus or increase consensus? Next slide. So easy stuff. The other folks already did this, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. Be punctual, accept the invite within 1 to 2 days, submit before the deadline. And I know what I say here, do you like waiting on late reviewers? Some thought that you should have in your mind as you review is the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is we all sit and complain about the review process. I can't believe reviewers did this. I can't believe reviewers did that. Except we're those reviewers. The same people complaining about these problems are the same ones who are doing these things. Like not discerning on methods and just saying, well, I feel like I have to mention something about common method variants, so I'm going to mention something about common method variants. We've seen reviewers on papers that have 4 waves with multiple sources comment that, well, there's still some CMV because the 2 mediators were measured by the same person but at different times. And I'm thinking, well, what else are they supposed to do? Those are intrapsychic constructs. There's nobody else who can rate them. But reviewers often just say, I feel like I have to comment on this, so I'm going to comment on this. Spend time thinking about, is this truly a problem or not? And then structured. So list your major concerns first. Sometimes you'll get these stream of consciousness reviews, and that's not particularly helpful to the editor because they don't know what's particularly important to that reviewer or seen as a big issue. And they're also balancing comments in terms of importance across the different reviewers. Number your points. If you send a review to Beth Campbell without numbering your points, she might harbor some negative feelings towards you that may last for a very long time. And other reviewers, editors feel the same way. If you don't do these things, or there's no structure, or there's no numbering, we have to do it for you, which is just additional time. And finally, do a final read through to look at your structure. Once you've written through it, check for typos, check for repetition. Really spend some time on that review. Next slide. So I've run out of time, so I'm going to be very quick on these. You have to support your arguments. Authors have to support their arguments. And so when I see comments like this has already been shown and there's no citation, or other theories have suggested and there's no citation, authors see that as an unfair experience for them because it is unfair. You need to show that. Next slide. Again, so go through saying, I'm looking for reasons to recommend major revision rather than reject. Now, you're not able to find that on every paper, but your goal isn't to go, is this paper perfect? But would a substantially revised version of this potentially have the opportunity to move forward? Next slide. This is the one where we actually received a review not long ago where they said something like, I didn't see the contribution in the introduction, so I didn't review the rest of the paper. That is not the type of thing that as editors we want to see. Authors deserve to see a review of all the major portions of their paper, including the methods, even if they didn't justify their, the focus of their paper, their theory wasn't good. Help them see whether there's some nuggets in the method that were good, what could have been changed, and help the editor see the problems you might have seen. And this is the thing is sometimes if you take an extra 5 minutes to clarify your comment, you might save an author days or weeks of effort where they misunderstood something that you were saying. Next slide. Michael.
All right, thank you. So I put together some, I guess, tips and tidbits from both frameworks, reviewing a lot, seeing a lot of reviews, and so forth. And so hope these can be helpful in your reviewing. So I think one of the things I want to start off with is being humble. I have this phrase I say, people are smarter than their papers. Like evaluating one sentence or a paragraph without a discussion back and forth. People are much smarter than their papers, right? They're constrained to this text on a paper. And you've thought about this for a few hours and they've worked on this for years, right? And so you can have a more constructive tone. And one thing I'll talk about is I usually write the review and then I go back and edit my review to make it more constructive. And that's an easier way. I think it's important to evaluate observable content and not try to guess or make attributions about why content is the way it is or it's not the way it should be, right? So you don't want to judge people for their motives. Like we're academics, we love explaining behavior, right? But that a review is not a time to explain someone's behavior. So what is there in the paper or what is missing, and comment on those things, because otherwise it's not as productive, often inaccurate, and causes defensiveness. Shannon, sorry, I used animation, so this is kind of funny, but you're getting it right. More on providing solutions. So Mike had a good point about great authors provide solutions. I want to say, though, that not every point needs a solution, right? If you have a solution, offer it. If you don't, that's okay too, as long as it's direct and clear and constructive feedback, right? Solutions are better when, and several people have said this, when they preserve author autonomy. So Nadler has this point of autonomy-oriented help. I think that's a way to think about this is give them suggestions, some direction, but don't force them to do what you have. They might have a better solution if they spend time thinking about it. Next slide. A little bit on sort of this, do we need a perfect paper? I think a lot of times reviewers feel they have to like point out everything and point out every little flaw or mistake, and like papers that are published are not perfect papers, right? But they still make a contribution. So just a framework that may help you think about that. First and foremost, is it clear? Like you understand what the paper is doing? And if not, you can comment on that. Is the contribution meaningful? And I subdivide that in two ways. Like, is there actually a gap, right? So is there a gap that exists? It's accurate. They're not missing focal literatures. Other literatures don't speak to that gap. If it's not, then you can critique those things. And then the big one is, does the gap matter, right? And so that's the consensus shifting creation Mike was talking about, but also there's a lot of, good from the editor articles and best practice papers or paper awards where, you can see ways that people problematize the literature and so forth and learn from. So is that in that gap, in that meaningful contribution? And then lastly, do they sufficiently address this gap or fulfill what they promise? And that gets into the theorizing methods. And so again, a framework that sort of helps me think through how to evaluate and critique a paper. Next slide, please. All right, and so then just like in terms of this professional development, upping your game. So I think we'll share some best practices that we curated for this session. I'd highly recommend reading those if you haven't. Per what Mike said, learn from bad reviews you've received, right? I feel like reviewers and authors, it's like severance. Where like our brains don't talk to each other when we're authors on the review process, when we're reviewers, right? So think about it. What makes a review bad you received, and like what would you do differently? Then like implement that in your reviews, right? We talked about revising reviews before submitting them. I've actually early on, I asked colleagues for feedback on reviews, especially for if I was reviewing for an editor the first time. I really wanted to make sure it was clear and understandable. So I've asked for a quick review on my reviews. And then, I think it's okay to spend time. I know people will vary on this, but like I tend to spend a day. Earlier on, I was spending a day on a review, and also I use that as an opportunity to learn a literature, right? It's fun. Like I don't always get to read. So like the papers they're citing that are core to their article, I would like read those and make a day out of it, a learning and development day. So that's all I have. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so we'll get started to the main event. This is where the fun begins. So we're gonna go to breakout rooms. We're gonna do two rotations of about 20 minutes each. So just best practices, try to get through the introductions quickly so you can get to the good stuff. Focusing on reviewing practices, judgments, norms, how these folks have learned to be great reviewers over time. And then once again, I just want to emphasize that like these folks are volunteering their generous expert time to talk about the journal generally, not like specifics on any specific journal or experience. All right. And with that, Carrie, can you tell us how this is going to work mechanically?
Sure. So there will be 24 breakout rooms for the 24 AEs, and all the participants will be randomly assigned to one of the breakout rooms. So once you are there, please just wait for a minute or so to let the AE join your room.
So associate editors and other breakout room facilitators, you can see the rooms here. Your name is listed next to a number. Please go to that room number and join your group.
All right, I'll start breakout rooms now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the main room. I am sorry to cut short or cut off anyone in the middle of conversations, but we're going to do 2 rounds of breakout rooms to give you exposure to multiple editors here. So, Harry, if you give us just a second here, Harry's going to re-randomize, reshuffle people into 12 rooms. We're going to make fewer rooms that are going to be a little bit larger. And we're also going to pair up our guests, our editors. So, editors, once the new rooms have been recreated and opened, please head to the rooms you see on the screen here. So, Harry, how are we doing? All right, new rooms are good to go. Please head there, and we'll see you in about 20 minutes.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And we're going to nerd out as a big, broad friends and family group now. We're excited to hear about what you got, what was learned, what came up in groups. So we have about 20 minutes to do this. And what we want to do is just have the room facilitators share some highlights from their conversations. If you like don't have something new and insightful to offer, which I doubt, you don't no, we don't need to hear from every voice. But when you're ready, when AEs are ready, to chat with a question, a theme, an insight that came from your discussion, could you guys do the raise hand feature, and then John and I will sort of get to as many voices as possible because I'm sure that we could all learn from sort of the collective wisdom and conversation in the group. All right, so who wants to start? Any hot takes?
I don't think we have a hot take, but something that ended up coming out in both of my review rooms was the private box to the editor. And I shared really candidly that when I first started, I either used to leave it blank or embarrassingly, like I would actually write a letter to the editor, be like, hey Beth, hey girl, hope you're doing well. My review's below. Like I just had no idea what to do with that box. But now, and Lindy and I were just talking about this as well, really helpful things are to use that box to really let the AE get into your mindset of how you approach the review. Mm-hmm. So really, if you recommended reject, explaining why that was the case and what your deal breakers are, and assuming that the AE might decide to give it an R&R in anyway, what might be some pass forward or think your must-haves, your gifts, so to speak, if an AE is going to give that paper a revision. Because if you don't do that, and you recommend reject and I go against you, you're probably going to be really unhappy when you get that paper back because you've given me very few paths to go ahead and appease the concerns. Mm-hmm. On the other side, if you do give an R&R, but maybe you were on the fence and you really weren't sure which way you were going to go. I just had this happen a few months ago at JAP where a reviewer said that they actually wrote 2 versions of their reviewer comments, one where they thought they were going to say reject and one where it was an R&R. And they went back and forth and back and forth. And that was really helpful because I was also going back and forth. So just to really understand that process is really cool. And then highlight areas where you feel unsure. So methodologically, if you have been handed a mixed methods paper and study one is grounded theory and you have never evaluated grounded theory before, one, do a little homework to understand what are some do's and don'ts of that, and then highlight to the AE where you're really hoping that you can have some extra methodological support. So that's where we spent some of our time talking. And Lindy, I don't know if there's anything. And you had a great point that Jenny also had mentioned of if you're a new reviewer to ask for feedback. So I think Jenny's hand is up. I hope I didn't steal your thunder. But I thought that was such a great point to say, hey, I would love feedback, particularly maybe on the following points.
Yep, I ask for feedback every single time. I will be retired before I stop asking for feedback in my reviews. All right, Alad, what do you got for us?
I think a theme that came up a lot is around it's both a how do you phrase, but also kind of how much autonomy do you want to provide to the authors, both from a reviewer standpoint and kind of how AEs think about that. And what we talked about in our room and the way I think about it is a little bit we a lot of us kind of familiar with this what is the in negotiation kind of position versus interest. And I think sometimes I see reviewers writing about their position. This is what you need to do, rather than saying, this is my concern, right? One way to solve it might be this way, but the point is solving the concern rather than doing exactly what the reviewer asked. And the more I think you give options of how to address that, especially early on, the better it is. Because as Michael said earlier, the authors are closer. They know what the possibilities are. They know what the directions are. They thought about some of the downsides of that. So I always try to leave that opportunity option. And that's true methodologically and also in theory. I might think that a theory would work, but I always try to say this is a option rather than the option, because the point is to convince us that whatever is a problem, that the logic fits or that the constructs fit together, etc.
Thanks a lot. JP, what do you got for us?
Hey, I think in both rooms, the issue of efficiency came up. I think, and I don't know how well we addressed it, but so my sense is people, obviously, the number of people that signed up and that are here show, there's a strong sense of value. People want to be helpful, but there's also so many demands on our time, and certainly for folks on multiple editorial review boards um, and so there's this question of balance and how much is too much. And I think we had some nice um, uh, uh, thoughts and ideas around when to decline, for instance. And so this theme, as Ali brought up about communicating with the editor, hey, I want to be helpful, but is this really within my expertise, so on and so forth. So I think knowing your own bandwidth is really important because I think just as Gilad said, like late reviewers, it's hard to, I'm very bad at chasing them down, which is not great for me, but it is more work and it doesn't help our authors, right? A lot of authors are junior. The timeliness of these decisions really matters for their careers. So I think it's a point well taken about how to balance. So it's not just, I think, how much time does it take me to do one review, which we talked about prioritization and really being selective in what you want to put into the letter, like what's really helpful for the authors and the editor to hear. But I think more broadly, managing the number of review requests and being really thoughtful about that too.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I wish I would have heard that earlier in my career. I overextended myself. Jenny, what you got for us?
Hello. So in both rooms, actually, this concern or question came up about how to prioritize issues in the review. And I think that both Lindy and Luke, who I was paired with in both rooms, had really good suggestions about like just overall like your theoretical contribution, especially in the first round, being really important and sticking to like the bigger points. But I think sort of a more fine-grained question that came up in the last room was like, but how do you know which are the most important issues? And so I was thinking that so one of the things that can be really helpful is to read the the decision letter, like when you get the decision letter back from the AE, to read not just the decision letter, but like see when they're mentioning your review, and then go back and check what was that comment that I said that they mentioned, because clearly that was an important comment in their decision. But then also read the other reviewers' comments, especially the ones that the AE is picking up on, because that will help kind of identify like at least what that AE thought were the critical issues from all three reviews. And I think if you do, like I still do that, I think if you do that over time, it also then helps you see what the biggest issues are, especially if you're struggling with that.
Completely love that. And I'm just going to out myself. To this day, when I see the decision letter come through that I'm a reviewer on, I click. I'll be like on my phone, like at the gym, like zooming in. And I'm like, oh, yes, the AE is saying, like quoting me. And it's like, I get I should admit that I get a little bit competitive because I want to see that my points are the points that landed. Whatever. Got to keep it fun for yourself. Got to keep it fun. So I love that advice. Thanks, Jenny. Talia. Talia, can you also tell us about how many decision letters you've written?
I don't know.
Over 1,000 for sure, right?
I don't know. I mean, probably for the review issue for JOM alone, probably 1,000. But yeah, a lot. But I really like the conversation so far. I think the person who was mentioning balance, I think over the two different breakouts I was in, it was about balancing kind of roles, responsibilities, and fairness. And I think those are kind of nice heuristics to think about a lot of what goes into this, because there's all these different stakeholders involved in this process. And I'm also seeing over in the chat a lot about teams. And I think that's really the thing is we are all of these things at some point, right? We rotate in these roles. And so I think that's a nice way to think about it, rather than poor me, I have this review to do, or I have so much going on, or poor me, I'm an author and I got this unfair review. It's kind of like, pay it forward. A lot of the things that we've talked about came up in the discussions. On a more pragmatic level, one of the questions was, how do you let AEs and editors know that you're interested in reviewing? And I think everyone has every editor here probably has a different take on how much they want to be approached. But certainly letting people know that are in your research area that you're interested in reviewing and volunteering is a good thing. You can obviously take that too far by spamming everyone in the universe, being too aggressive at social hours, that sort of thing. But I think just raising your hand and saying I'm interested is always a good thing. So I encourage people to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jess, what do you got for us?
Hey everyone. So my groups were fantastic. Thank you all for participating and asking great questions. I want to piggyback on Talia's last comment. Something that came up in both rooms was, how do I get invited to conduct my first review? So how is this something that I can get exposed to? I'm not even sure how to do this. And so, our responses were around, of course, when you submit a paper, you become, you now have a profile and you're in the system. You added keywords. Those keywords are going to come up when AEs start searching. If they don't have someone in mind and they go by keywords. So make sure that your keywords are helpful and specific, not just like you list every single keyword you possibly can. So that's one way, is actually submitting. Another, to Talia's point, of course, is reaching out. So you haven't reviewed at that journal before, but you're interested. Maybe you have someone in your network who's currently an associate editor who's on the editorial review board. You can say, listen, I'm interested in starting to review at this journal. Would you be willing to, kind of list me or think about inviting me? Here are, the skills that I've built and why I think I'm qualified to do this. And here are the areas that I think I'm qualified to review in. So just, keep me on your radar if anything comes up. So those are, really good ways to do that. And then I think one of the consistent themes kind of related to that was, how do I know if I'm qualified to start reviewing? So, especially early career, maybe PhD students or people who hadn't been exposed to reviewing a lot, is like, I'm not an expert. I don't think I'm an expert. I'm still learning. When do I know that I'm really ready? And, we all are always concerned, like maybe this isn't an area that I'm an expert in. And there are ways to balance that. My one recommendation, or the first thing that I would say is PhD students are probably more in the literature than most senior scholars. You are reading more than we are at any point in time. So you're probably more familiar with some of the recent things that are going on. But you might get a paper that's not specifically in what you consider to be your area of interest or expertise. And so it might take a little while to look into some of those papers, feel comfortable providing comments. But as they mentioned earlier in the presentations, you're not the one making a decision on the paper. You're just making a recommendation. And so do what you feel comfortable with. And to Ali's point too, you can acknowledge like this isn't my strength, that I'm not familiar with this particular method, but I do feel familiar, I do feel comfortable commenting on the content. So that's where I focused my review. And that's okay to comment both in the review and to the editor in that box. Just to say, here's where I felt like I focused my efforts. But start reviewing for the OB division at Academy. Starting to review at conferences is the lowest barrier, lowest risk way to start building those skills. And then a quick question was, well, should I start reviewing for lower tiered journals, what we consider to be lower tiered journals? And my answer, at least as an early career scholar, would be yes. You don't necessarily want to continue that. You can be more strategic with the narrow set of journals you want to focus on later. But at least to start building those skills, accepting an invitation to review is always good.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Dr. Badura.
My comments are very similar to Talia and Jessica. That the question of how you get on reviewing opportunities and editorial board was something that kept coming up. And I think that's really cool because to review well, you have to be reviewing. And so the fact that that's where your mindset is a really positive thing. A lot of my comments are very similar to what both Talia and Jessica said, so I'm not going to repeat those, but some of the things that I found a lot of success in getting on editorial boards and just having the opportunity to review at journals in general. When I had a paper accepted at a journal, I reached back out to that associate editor and, expressed gratitude for their, shepherding through the process. And I offered my willingness to be a reviewer if they had a paper in that scope. And I think that sort of was the slippery slope for me for reviewing, particularly at PSYC. And I had a lot of fun with it. And from there, being timely, and this is something, Mike Baer mentioned, being timely and doing a good job is how you convert long-term into editorial board members. And so I'm not going to reinvite a reviewer if they do a lukewarm job and they're an ad hoc reviewer. If they do a great job and they're timely, I'm going to try to start to help them build towards a reviewer record that we can then advocate for them being on an editorial board. And so when you get those opportunities, only say yes if you can do a really good job and you can do it in a timely fashion. But also be cognizant of not saying no too much, because that will also weigh in over time to those decisions.
Beautiful. Thank you. Who else? Any other parting words, surface insights? Yeah, Chris, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on something that Gilad said in the chat. And so one of the questions that came up during my session was like, how do we get started? How do we begin? Yeah. And so I think it's great to reach out to, if you're a grad student, your advisor or your mentor, and talk to them about co-reviewing opportunities, even if they're not formal. So I like JAP's like mechanism for recognizing contributions of junior scholars, but in all honesty, like first year doctoral students, that first review, I'm generally not finding stuff to put in my review as a reviewer. But I use it more as a learning process for them so they can actually see the tone, the phrasing. There's all these minor pitfalls that you see the first time that someone submits, or that you have a doctoral student, you're working with them on a review. And so those things like tone and phrasing are super important. And I'm self-taught as a reviewer. My advisor did not help me at all. And I remember having a pretty embarrassing situation my first year as a reviewer where I realized my tone was completely off. I wasn't like this paper's garbage, but pretty close to being dismissive. Fortunately, I changed over time, but I think that to hone the skill set, you learn it by doing it. And the best case scenario is you have someone that can help mentor you through the process. And then big plug for Journal of Management right here. We have the Aim High program. So people, graduate students who are looking for mentoring, or people on this call who are more senior, who are thinking about giving back. Sherry Thatcher and others are running that program for us. And if you're interested, feel free to reach out. But it's a good opportunity for, if you don't have access to good mentoring, to get involved in the process, and mentoring all around. But part of it does pertain to reviewing. So thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. All right. And the last AE word goes to Dr. Mitchell.
This is actually going to be a call to those who are AEs on theory-oriented papers. And this came up in our session. And it was more like, how do you attack the strategy of reviewing for a theory piece? And they brought up a variety of different types of papers, which I told them they really need to understand. And annals is different from a JP ICR, different from an AMR, different from a JOM review proposal, right? So open call to AEs in AMR theory pieces, any kind of little tidbits that you can give to the listening population.
Sure. I love this question. I think JP and I are like, going back and forth in the chat. Our first recommendation is to take a look at the Bridge Reviewer program. So if you are not familiar with this, it's something that Sherry Thatcher started at AMR when she was an editor there. And so I'm thrilled that she's kind of transferring some of these efforts to JOM as well. I don't think we can have enough of it, but the Bridge Reviewer program is you can apply to become a member or to become a participant, and you get access to all of these reviewing resources directly related to theory and how to review theory, but the material is relevant to being a good reviewer at any journal, whether it's empirical or not. Things about recognizing biases, how to structure a review, how to think about what makes a theory paper novel. So really, really useful resources, tips, materials. And then you kind of go through this and you graduate from the Bridge Reviewer program. You get invited at AOM to this ceremony where our Bridge Reviewers graduate. But you get paired with a mentor. This has been kind of revised a little bit since Sherry started it. But you get a Bridge Reviewer mentor who looks at your reviews, and then your review can be considered to be sent to the author as well. And then once you graduate from the program, you're in our system as a potential reviewer. And so it's just a really great way to get exposure, but also just start to get access to some of these resources that are directly related to what it means to review a theory paper.
JP. Awesome. Anything to add, JP, before we wind down?
Well, I'm seeing the unfortunate response.
Oh, that it's
but,
Irina.
Yeah, we do have, when it's back up, I will still plug it because I have a little bit of a hand in it, with mainly Chris Byron, our current editor, led the charge there. So there are modules, Jess, myself, the rest of the team, to address these kinds of questions. We have little short asynchronous videos. There are readings about the different types of theory papers. So there's a treasure trove of resources on that Canvas site. So we really do need to get it back online. In the meantime, I did direct people to our YouTube series as well. You can check those out too. And I think even some older content from Sherry's team about talking to authors too, and that Greg Fisher led. So speaking with AMR authors where they talk about their responses during the review process. So I think you get some of the author's perspective, which can help inform your perspective as a reviewer. And I'm going to take note of these other links for JOM and JAP too, because I think it's great that all the journals are doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And whether or not, I just want to emphasize whether or not your folks in the room are going to be reviewing theory papers, that training is excellent. Those articles are excellent and it'll help you when you're reviewing the front end of empirical papers as well, that they've really done a great service to the field with those resources. Okay, well, let me land the plane here for us. It wouldn't be an OB division party if there wasn't a party favor. And so we have that for some folks. Also, one thing I want to mention is that we are gathering data from this series about folks, attendees who are working on, they're interested in reviewing, they're showing up to learn how to review well. So at the end of this all, we will share with AEs and editors in chief, like the names of folks maybe to watch who are interested in reviewing. So what we're going to ask is, for folks here, and AEs, if you want to fill this out, I love that for me. But for attendees, if you could click on this QR with your phone, or we can put the link in the chat. What are 3 useful pieces of advice you that were resonated with you? What are 2 things that you want to put into action? And then number 1, please, we would love if you could answer what's 1 question or thing that you really still want to learn about the review process. This will shape our programming at Academy. We have part 2, the Sunday of Academy. And then we have part 3 after Academy, where you get to practice reviewing. One last thing is, if you complete that survey, at the very end of the survey is a link to a Google Drive that has a bunch of resources that were curated by AEs and editors in chief on this call, of different things that they've read along the way. That has helped them and been formative to them and how they think about the review process. So a lovely little reading list. So here's what's next. Part 2 at Academy, Sunday of Academy. Look for more emails and information about that. And then part 3 is that more experiential follow-up, where you'll get to practice and work with AEs and review something and get feedback on a review. Anything I missed, Shannon?
That's it. We want to wish you all the very best for the remaining summer. We very much appreciate you joining us today, for listening, for sharing, and most of all, for what you are all currently or will be doing to advance our science. We are especially appreciative to the 28 editors and associate editors who joined us to lead breakout rooms today. And again, I just want to give a final thanks and shout out to our organizing subcommittee, John, Anish, Alex. Thank you again so much. We do hope you take a minute to complete that survey, provide us with some feedback, and receive our party gift to you. So best of wishes from all of us, and we hope to see you all at Academy in Philadelphia.